Hello, and welcome again to AI Ramblings, episode number 24. Neil, 25 next week. Are you excited?
Yes, I
Neil,
am. I am.
this is Neil Makwana here, and the handsome fellow in white, and Michael Parekh. I stayed in black today. By the way, I like your T-shirt. What does it
Thank you.
say? Can you show us the graphic?
Yeah, it's
Oh, it's
yeah, it says
very,
IDA. It's a clothing brand out of London.
very cool. I love the logo. All right. So
Thanks.
very busy again. Things are accelerating exponentially. We are flooded with, normally we're flooded with AI news. I think this week we're actually flooded with AI news almost just from OpenAI. They've had, by my count, at least 7 or 8 major announcements, extraordinary execution level by the company and impacting market caps of a lot of adjacent companies like AMD and Oracle and NVIDIA in the billions of dollars. So topic number one we want to talk about today is OpenAI's Dev Day, which they just had for developers. They're now at 800 million users worldwide every week. And they've announced some very cool technologies for developers to incorporate a ChatGPT into their apps and so on. We wrote a lot about it. Again, as usual, all this will be in the show notes. But the general assessment by watchers is that this is, again augments OpenAI's ambition to be an AI operating system of sorts. And this is before they even yet officially launched their AI browser, which would compete with Chrome by Google that you and I have talked about for months, and whatever Apple does on Safari. So OpenAI's Dev Day and Deals Month, they've had all these major multi-$100 million, by all accounts, if you add them all up, over $1 trillion of capital, and a lot of criticism from Wall Street, a little bit, that hey, these are a little bit circular, these deals that NVIDIA invests into OpenAI. OpenAI then takes money and gives it to NVIDIA to buy a whole bunch of chips. They just did a similar deal with AMD. So the deals and the Dev Day developments are massive. So that's number one. Number two, news items of the week is OpenAI also was in the news. They're apparently having some challenges that are reported on their highly anticipated AI devices portfolio with Johnny Ive that you and I talked about several months ago. This is after the $6.5 billion acquisition of IO by OpenAI, which is Johnny Ive's company, and it also harkens to the device problems as you put AI in for companies like Amazon with Alexa. They just launched Alexa Plus. We had write-ups on this. Apple is committed to having an AI Siri by next week. Google announced a whole bunch of Google Home products and Nest products with AI. There's a lot of challenges to leveraging AI into this stuff and then scaling it up. So that's another topic we want to discuss today. And number three are some new interesting applications around AI services around the home through these speakers and cameras, both inside and around the home, that are potentially all very interesting applications that could be used by tens, if not hundreds of millions of people already with these devices, these Ring cameras and Google security cameras, etc., that over 100 million households have around the world. It could be enabled by AI, and with generative AI, you can do all kinds of new interesting things with these devices than you could ever do before with the old deterministic systems. And then the last thing amongst a number of other topics is this week also saw an explosion of video AI content feeds apps. OpenAI it had their own Sora app, which is top of the charts, reminiscent of their big success with the Ghibli images, for a few weeks ago that, was all the rage, where, everyone and I know was creating Ghibli images of themselves on OpenAI. And now that, the people are creating all these cool videos of themselves doing weird things. So, and Meta has got a similar app called Vibes, and then you've got other companies, Google, etc., also racing in here. So the AI video Slop, as we talked about AI video Slop last week. That boom is continues. Maybe it's novelty factor, maybe not. We don't know. But those at a high level are some of the just major news topics that are on our plate.
Yeah.
So, Neil, dig in.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Yeah, I guess starting at the top with a lot of the OpenAI stuff. I think it was great. As you said, I think you hit it on the nose. What they seem to built in with a lot of the apps being brought into ChatGPT, it's very reminiscent or seems to allude to some sort of an operating system that's there maybe not calling it an operating system, but that's maybe how they're approaching it. It's also very reminiscent of, the second or third generation iPhone that finally got the App Store. It's obviously they added almost an App Store like feature last year, being able to create your own GPTs, and there was a GPT store essentially. But this is one where we're bringing in established apps and platforms into ChatGPT, and it brings up the question of, we've discussed this idea of AI browsers and stuff a lot in the past, and there were reports that OpenAI are building their own, as you mentioned, but it raises the question as to, is this something that they would maybe even need, because they're adding these apps into ChatGPT where you can interact with them. ChatGPT already has the ability to search the internet, not exactly as a search engine, but pull links similar to how Perplexity does, and provide sourcing, and it raises the question as to, is that maybe a duplication of efforts? Obviously, the browser provides a lot of revenue streams and other opportunities that just ChatGPT itself would not. But it's all, I think, good for the sake of conversation. The other thing is, you touched on it a bit, but with the partnership with Johnny Ive and IO, unfortunately, I looked online as much as I could, but there was no footage of Johnny Ive speaking. He spoke at Dev Day. All the reports are just via blogs and reporters and whatnot. So but yeah, it's the same thing that was reported last week. I believe it was the Financial Times that said that, they're a bit behind schedule on this, and with the device that has so much hype, it's probably better for them to wait. As I'm going to talk about a little later in the show, there was another big viral AI gadget called Friend that launched and kind of flopped pretty widespread on social media. So I'll talk about that in a bit. But it all goes into saying that these things do take time, as we've talked about in the past. I think it's best that they take their time and hopefully try and get it right to go with, because as it is with most of these things in tech, I think first impressions are everything, as we saw with the Humane Pin and a lot of the other wearable AI devices. If you don't get it right to start with, I don't think anyone's going to take it seriously. So yeah, I think there's a lot of great stuff to unpack.
Hardware is hard, is the old
Mhm.
aphorism for 30 years that I've been in technology investments and analysis. And today it's extraordinarily harder, especially because of tariffs and supply chain issues and so on, especially if your ambition is to go from 0 to 50, 100 million plus devices. These are extraordinary. These are, entire companies are built around this. And this is something that these companies are basically trying to do along with 6, 8, 10 other things they're doing. So crazy times. I couldn't agree more. In terms of the dev day on AI browsers versus operating system, the one thing it's very clear that OpenAI is doing is they are in the happy circumstance of the world basically identifying ChatGPT as AI. And so, most regular people are not thinking about browsers. Even today, we've talked about your mom, we've asked her questions, mainstream user example. How does she Google? For her, a browser is still a very vague concept 25 years into this thing. So most people, if they're just going into ChatGPT and using it as a browser by typing in long queries and so on, then it makes sense to, if you can then invoke applications of third parties in there, that's an opportunity. And whether it sticks or not, it's another question. But that's why OpenAI went out of their way to have, by my count, at least 2 to 3 dozen big company launch partners that have apps that are integrated into ChatGPT. So this is an additional thing they have to do to leverage their ability to become the AI browser. It doesn't have to be in the traditional type of browser that we've been talking about the last few weeks. A Perplexity, which has a Comet browser, or the browser company, which has their Dia browser, they have no choice because they don't have the oomph and the clout and the scale and the global brand recognition of an OpenAI. So they have to do their version of an AI browser. ChatGPT, OpenAI, maybe they don't even need it. Pretty sure they will also launch a browser, only because you got to cover your bases. If you're in a broad war, you got to make sure your forces are deployed on every vector, flank, front, back, etc. And so, very interesting landscape, chessboard move. So I think all of this is just very indicative of where we are on all of this, which just brings us to our major topic of the week, which is the AI video slop boom, is the way I kind of paraphrased it. And I've had a chance to play around with it a little bit, not a ton. There are a lot of binary opinions on this. People are enchanted with it. They're excited about it, but there are a lot of risks associated with this. There's a lot of copyright issues around this. Sam Altman himself, initially when they launched Sora 2 as an app, they said, if you as a content company want to opt out on our end, and we'll accommodate it. And now he's going back on that because he's getting feedback real time at scale with a lot of content folks saying, hey, we want much more robust tools to be able to govern how our content is used for this video generation. So they are basically being the guinea pig at scale on video content generation, that the Metas and the Googles who are also in this race, and potentially others, will be here. And you're going to see a ton of stuff out of China along those lines as well. We're already seeing some of it there. So the whole world is experimenting. There are a lot of issues, a lot of privacy concerns, a lot of copyright concerns, a lot of fake video, deep fake. There's a lot of potential for bad stuff to happen at individual level and at a societal level with this stuff. But at the same time, it's an extension of the short video boom that, TikTok launched around the world with over 2 billion users on that front for them alone. And we're about to see a US TikTok be spun off in the next few weeks. So this is all part of the same stew. And, just new ingredients being plopped in. And so a lot of things to pay attention to on the pro and con side. What do you think? Have you heard anything on all this from your friends?
Yeah, anecdotally, you hit on it a bit. I think with the younger generation, it's been a lot more polarizing in terms of the sentiment I've heard from most people that have either gotten to use it or have kind of seen the clips of it on other social media platforms, because obviously this is all watermarked with the Sora branding on any video, so you'll know immediately where it came from. I think it's mostly negative in terms of, people are not comfortable with it, especially I think with the cameo feature. I think that's the one that's drawing the biggest concern, at least from people my age, because obviously with a lot of these things in tech, you can look at them as, glass half full, glass half empty. But the reality of it is that when you're giving people this ability to add friends of theirs who have scanned their faces, I mean, for anyone who may not be familiar, the onboarding process is one where you scan your face, very similar to how you do on an iPhone. Whenever you're setting up Face ID for the first time, you have to rotate your face around to get all the angles and contours that they're able to generate a model to make these videos with. But the ability to be able to just add someone's hashtag and add someone's handle, their username, and bring them into your video and have them essentially do whatever you want them to do is a bit concerning in terms of giving anyone the ability to do whatever they would like with it. And because of this, ever since the release, there's already been one patch where you're able to mark that I don't want to be able to say these certain words or be associated with these types of videos. So again, with this type of tech, it's never going to be right the first time, and they're going to have to iterate on it and fix it. But yeah, I think there is a bit of concern also just for what this does to social media in terms of the content we're consuming. I think there's already such a hyper attention being put onto people's time spent on social media, as we've discussed. And, there's one thing to be spending time mindlessly consuming content that's been created by people. There's another thing to be doing it mindlessly for AI generated content that's fully synthetic from start to finish. So it's weird. It's different. I think it's too early to form a solid opinion on it until we kind of get to see all the use cases. But I think the early consensus right now, at least from Gen Z and people my age, are maybe a bit more of concern than optimism by it.
I think those are great points. But having said that, I will just say that this is trodden ground. You recognize, again, especially your generation, they led the charge with, for instance, Snapchat. So when Snap, Evan Spiegel, he was one of the pioneers to put a lot of the virtual decorative technologies around people's personal images on your photos, make ourselves do, rainbow vomit and all this other stuff. And kids were very excited, and they did this in the tens of millions, sharing all of this in groups, not broadly necessarily on social media feeds, but in groups. And that is one thing, Sam specifically said they were surprised by in the early days of Sora 2 launch, that a lot of the AI generated videos that are being created, customized on people's faces, is being used in groups, not necessarily in the feeds. And so you're seeing the same proclivities that every generation is interested in, whether it's images and video. The decision points for these companies is how much of how much of that they want to encourage within groups, which is a relatively safer environment for people because they're sharing with friends. Hopefully they trust them, etc. Versus at large on the broad video feed where anyone can take, your face or my face and just create all kinds of things and make us say weird things or inappropriate things and so on. So this problem now and an opportunity, because glass is half full, half empty, is not just for celebrities anymore. In this new brave world or brave new world, we are all pseudo celebrities with upside and downside. And we've seen this with social media for the last 20, 25 years. Facebook in the early days, first kids, then, everyone, including my age, was basically advertising everything they're doing, their kids, their vacations, etc. This is just a video version of all of that, and it's the beginning of that. So again, as I said, last week, AI slop, it can also be AI treasure, and those things can be both true at the same time. And at the same time, the notable thing from an OpenAI today is they're okay for now taking the risks of the downside this early on. They are moving fast and okay to break people's personas and their reputations and so on. That is a risky endeavor, but they're taking it. Why? Because the world is competitive. If they don't do it, Meta's going to do it. If Meta doesn't do it, Elon's going to do it with Grok, and if he doesn't do it, some other people are going to do it. On the other hand, you do have companies like Google, who I think will be more measured on what they do and how much craziness is allowed on these features. So we're going to have the full, gamut of experiences around AI video generation, whether it's based on people, based on artificial content, and everything in between. So exciting times. And I'm sure we'll be coming back to this topic again. So that's our major topic of the week, which brings us to our reads of the week. Mm-hmm. And you have a good one, Neil, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, it's one that I kind of mentioned in passing at the beginning of the episode when we were talking about Johnny Ive and what they might be doing with OpenAI. It's an article from the New York Times, but I'm sure people have seen this everywhere. It's a startup called Friend.com, which is essentially a wearable AI companion pendant, which is, of course, as the name alludes, been marketed as a friend. And it was a bit polarizing, because of the way that the marketing campaign was done. They took out ads in the New York subway, and they were very on the nose as to what it does. It feels very similar to Her, if anyone is familiar with that movie with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. All the billboards just say the word friend, and it just says someone who supports, listens, responds to you. And there was immediate backlash, as it is with something that is this maybe such a jarring thing that, hey, we're going to have this pendant you can wear on. It's going to be a friend for you. Of course, there's a lot of concern with stuff like that. And almost every billboard was graffitied and vandalized with people saying that, this is not the future and this is not, the best thing for us as a society. And the reason I bring it up is because of what we talked about with Johnny Ive and how important it is to get this right the first time you do it, because, it's the same thing that happened with Humane. You could argue that Humane as a company, one of the biggest reasons for their failure was MKBHD, who we talk about a lot. He posted a review which is saying, it was the worst product he'd ever reviewed. When the public, and especially people of voice and reason in the community, start to say these really, really definitive statements, I think it can do a lot to kill a product. Of course, MKBHD was not the sole reason Humane failed. There was several product-related issues that it wouldn't have succeeded with or without him. But I think the main point I'm trying to drive home is, in this world where so much of this engagement is drawn on social media, if there is an overwhelming negative sentiment around this stuff, I think you kind of shoot yourself in the foot right at the start line of the race, because the Humane, this friend pin shipped to people. It's a pendant, and when people got it in hand, it was nothing like what was promised. It looks like a really cheap plastic white disc with what looks like a shoelace, not the braided necklace that they advertised. And yeah, so I think more or less it just goes to talk about some of the marketing and virality around this. Of course, the guy who did this, I believe he's 22. He knew what he was doing. He knew that he was making this as polarizing as possible. And as they say, no press is all press is good press. In this case, even though it's a lot of negative press, for the $1 million he invested in the subways, he's gotten double that on social media. because everyone's posting about it. So it's as you said, it's a brave new world we're living in. It's interesting. A lot of stuff that we've seen before just repackaged, and it's something that caught my attention this week. So.
No, I think it's a great article to point out, especially this time, given all the broader issues we were talking about, video slop, etc. But the one thing I will say, of 30 plus years of being in the technology business, watching across waves, generally entrepreneurs, they benefit by taking more risks than less risks. And so you cannot be afraid of the downsides. Obviously, you want to be cognizant of the harms that you can do, etc. But like you said, in most cases, there is no, all publicity is good, even bad publicity. And you just have to be nimble enough to execute and thick-skinned enough to do it. That's how Travis Kalanick was able to build Uber. If you look at the first 2 or 3 years of that, any normal entrepreneur would have basically said, okay, I'll hang it up, because the criticisms, the regulations, the rules, the lawsuits, the reviling of him globally by countries to people was massive. And that's just one of dozens of examples. Zuckerberg with Facebook itself was in the same boat. So the core thing is competing in the arena. And that's the one thing I'll just say for all technology, just because the opportunities are fleeting, and what technologies enable is very unique. You never know whether it's a feature or a product. You never know if it's something that's a novelty that'll take off or not take off. You got to try. So glass half full. I'm just kind of underlining that because that's the essence of the tech business. Okay. So my read of the week is the topic we talked about earlier in OpenAI being viewed as a framing as an operating system. And this was an obsession of mine this week. Why? Because I've been trafficking in operating systems all my entire career. When I was at Goldman on the technology side, the firm took Microsoft public in '86. I was very involved with when Netscape launched their browser. So I've seen the front row parts of this stuff, and operating systems are extraordinarily complex things, especially requiring huge amount of developer support. That's why this being framed by OpenAI at its dev day was very interesting to me. And I'm deep in the weeds of how developers are reacting to, we just talked about one, but they announced actually half a dozen or more major technology initiatives that are all components of an operating system in a traditional way. And so all of that is important in many ways. And I said this in the post I had on this issue. This is very reminiscent to me when Facebook announced its F8 developer conferences way back in 2007. This is about 3-4 years after they broke into the mainstream with hundreds of millions of users. They realized they were a platform, and they created this series of conferences with huge amount of software integration opportunities for third party to build applications on top of the platform. And you had companies like Zynga and all these other things emerge out of that created billions in wealth for their founders and investors and so on. So this operating system thing is very interesting to watch in that historical perspective, especially because every entrepreneur, every investor, public, private, has now seen 4 to 6 major tech waves, and they know the learnings from that, so they can lean in and figure out what's the right way to invest in this. So this, as an operating system, is an obsession of mine. So I just wanted to highlight that as in my read of the week as well. Which brings us to our obsession of the week topic, formally.
Yeah.
And you have a good one here too.
Yeah. So mine is one that I actually found out about just yesterday, close to us recording this. But it's a research effort done by Google titled On Your Way. And it's essentially a research effort that was put together where they're reimagining textbooks with generative AI. This is something we've talked about AI in education on a couple episodes, just because me having recently graduated and having gone through the introduction of AI about halfway through my undergrad, I knew life before and after it and how it kind of affected the way people work and a lot of the potential downsides, but also a lot of the benefits of it. And I think this is a really cool way of what the future of AI could be in terms of education and the promise of it. For anyone who may not want to read through the whole research report, because it's pretty in-depth and extensive, but has a lot of good metrics. I encourage everyone to go look at it if you do all the time. But it's essentially a research effort where they allowed students to kind of do this one-size-fits-all, that this whole idea of everyone having to use the same textbook for years that are made mass produced for any type of audience, and to be able to personalize it, where essentially through this program you're able to input your grade that you're in and some of your interests, and it'll recontextualize in a multimodal way the entire textbook, including the actual text, but also the diagrams, videos, and skill activities within the textbooks. It'll recontextualize all of them for you personally using generative AI. So let's say it's a physics textbook, and I'm just trying to think back to what I would have liked to learn when I was in physics, rather than it just being the generic experiments you've heard about for years. If you could say that, hey, I'm in this grade and my interest is soccer, and it's able to recontextualize the entire book in terms of saying, when Messi hits the ball with his foot at this angle, with this speed on this type of surface, this is what happens to the ball. And, you would think that this would make the students more engaged, and actually does. There's metrics in the research paper, which essentially showed that there was a 11% higher score on in terms of retention rates, and 9% higher on immediate assessments compared to traditional textbooks, which is a pretty good increase in terms of how much people are able to pay attention and actually retain the information. But it's great. In my opinion, this is exactly what AI in education should look like. It should be personalized and built on top of foundational elements like textbooks and assessments, rather than just being a way to kind of maybe speed through or rush through concepts. I mean, even me in my master's program, there'd be several times where I'd be trying to learn a concept, and sometimes, a lot of these machine learning concepts are so, convoluted and difficult to understand that I a lot of times go to ChatGPT and ask it to explain it to me in simpler terms with methodology that maybe made a bit more sense. And this is that, but applied directly to the textbook in line for students to use. So it's a great piece, and I think it's a great step in the right direction with this stuff. In a world where we're talking about AI slop and a lot of this negativity surrounding AI content, I think this is a really good use case that's been proven to work.
No, I love it. I think it's a great read, and I would absolutely encourage people to take a look at it. My other obsession, because I talked about the operating system piece of it, but my other obsession of the week this week has been just I'm into gadgets, whether it's computers, phones, and gaming things. This week saw a big backlash. Xbox, Microsoft raised prices on Xboxes, and one big differentiation this time around versus past tech waves is for 30 years, consumers are basically used to more functionality on your gadgets, hardware and software, less pricing, lower pricing, or the same pricing going. And now with October tech announcements pretty much done, almost everything has been at increased prices. And so prices are going up. Part of this has to do with supply chain and tariff issues, which are unique to this tech wave. We've talked a lot about this. I've written a fair bit about this, etc. This is an issue that will, unfortunately continue to stay with us, especially as we look at AI devices into next year in the context of supply chains and so on. And so this week, Microsoft saw huge backlash on Xbox pricing, and also on the software side, they also doubled the pricing on the Ultimate Xbox Pass, the Game Pass. And so there was a lot of backlash on that. So this business of pricing going up, costs going up in technology is an unusual thing. And it's an obsession of mine to kind of track this stuff. So I wanted to highlight that. We'll have a couple of references on this if people want more data on some of this. Is anecdotal. It's building, but it's definitely there to watch. That continues to gadgets continue to be my obsession. So I wanted to highlight that. So it brings us to our burning questions of the week.
Yeah.
Neil?
Yeah, I can go ahead and start. It's
My
a
burning
little,
question for you, actually, let me just lead it off because you've been kind
yeah,
enough to lead off the other ones, is since we were talking about gaming platforms and so on, what are the current favorite gaming platforms for that your
yeah.
friends are looking forward to and maybe or maybe not complaining about prices going up or not?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't game nearly as much as I used to, but I turned on my Xbox yesterday for the first time in forever to play, with a couple friends. I treat it more as a way to kind of have a social meetup with people rather than actually play the game. It's just an alternative to doing a phone call for me, but I've always been an Xbox person. Obviously, when I was younger, I'd play mobile games. I've not really delved into PC and Steam and all that at all. But one thing I have noticed in terms of the pricing stuff is, a lot of my friends now are graduated and they're supporting themselves. and they're having to pay, these absurd prices for Xbox, Live and all these Game Passes and stuff, to where a lot of them have canceled it, because the reality is a lot of these games that we do play, things like Fortnite and stuff, don't require you to have Xbox Live. It just requires an internet connection, and there's game chat within the platform. Xbox also added Discord, which a lot of people have been asking for, onto the platform. So there's really a way to get around having to pay for some of these things when you are playing these, like, free to download games like Fortnite, and some of the others. But yeah, I'd say a majority of it is still just Xbox and console related things, not as much on the PC side. One thing I do wish that hopefully picks up a bit more is the handheld space, because I haven't played around in it at all, but it is something that's super promising, because it'd be great to, take my console with me wherever I go. I know it's something that you've played around with a bit. But I think it's just one of those things where, being a person out of college, the last thing, we want to do right now is spend monies. Whatever the cheapest and easiest way to access these things are, I think is just the reality of what we're doing.
You're talking to, the ultimate geek on handheld gaming. And there too, prices are going through the roof. I mean, these things were 300, 400, last 2 or 3 years, anywhere from $100 to $200, $300. Steam Deck is the best one. And still is the best one. But now there are Windows machines that go up to $1,000 and $1,500. It's crazy. But my recommendation for anyone into handheld gaming is and I have an extra Steam Deck that you can take off my hands anytime. But Steam Deck, both there's a $300-ish basic one, which with an LCD screen, and there's an OLED one with a nicer screen, which is about $400. That is still the best value. And Steam is owned by a company called Valve, and they have their own game store. And that's how they're able to keep the hardware prices down and make it up on the software, which the other competitors are not able to do. So in as much as you're interested in this and people out there are interested in it, this is another major obsession of mine. So we can talk about more about it on a future show, but absolutely fun stuff. And the technologies are getting better. AI is getting better in terms of playing these games on the move with less time that people have, because it can give you real-time hints and all that. It's really cool. The world is changing. So you have a burning question for me, and we can end the show.
I do, yeah. It has to do with some of what we talked about earlier, but it's this idea of, just to preface it a bit, with the launch of Sora and a lot of these AI generated, essentially fully AI generated social media platforms. A lot of people are saying they wouldn't be surprised if in a couple months the biggest social media platform is one that maybe has no AI allowed on it. It's only human generated content. And that's kind of where my question stems from, is obviously with a lot of these things, it's not a binary answer, but where do you see AI generated content fitting into the current landscape of social media?
I think social is in this too. You can't take it out. Yeah, people will try it. There'll be all kinds of, there are always gated communities, and they'll be always expendable. In our little club, there's no this, no that, etc., and that'll be there. From a mainstream point of view, the horse has left the barn. The toothpaste is out of the tube. Give me any analogy you want. These things are together. Why? Because this is entertainment, news, information, everything melded into one. And humans are interactive creatures. We want to share, even if it's me with my best friends, me with my family, me with the world at large. Going to share. So social is in the mix. Just that the technologies are going to change. In the last 25 years, Facebook, Twitter, it was the social graph. The service, when they launched, they're like, who are your friends? Give us all your friends. Give us access to your content, your contacts, so we can spam them. Today, it's like, the software watches you. This is what you're interested in, and then splurts it to everybody else. The technologies are different, but the underlying thing is still extraordinarily social, because all of a sudden, this is what makes anybody become an influencer, a creator. And we have gone from no influencers, no creators 5, 6, 10 years ago to now an economy on the influencer side that is bigger than traditional media, at over $300 billion this year, on our way to $500 billion on Goldman's recent estimates. So it's part of the mix, and it's global. And so to me, they're two sides of the same coin. So we'll see how it goes. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for AI Ramblings, episode 24. As usual, if you have any thoughts, suggestions, comments on any of the topics and on the show itself, please let us know. Like and subscribe, as always, would always be appreciated. And thank you for joining us, and stay tuned.
Wonderful. See you next time. Thanks.